The evening started like any other. The house was quiet, and the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen was the only sound accompanying the darkness outside. My mom and I lived in a small two-bedroom home at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, surrounded by tall trees and shadows that stretched endlessly into the night. It had always been a safe place, a sanctuary. That sense of safety vanished on this night. It was late October, and my mom had been working the night shift at the hospital. I was used to being home alone during these hours. That night, I was sprawled on the couch, a bowl of popcorn on the table, and the television flickering with some action movie I wasn't paying much attention to. The clock read 11:47 p.m. when I heard a faint, deliberate knock at the front door. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. Visitors at this hour were unheard of. For a moment, I convinced myself I had imagined it, but the knock came again. It was louder this time, more insistent. I crept to the door, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. Peeking through the peephole, I saw a man standing on the porch. He was tall, wearing a dark jacket, and his features were partially hidden by the shadow cast by the porch light. Something about his stance made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "Can I help you?" I called through the door, my voice shaking despite my attempt to sound firm. The man hesitated before answering. "Sorry to bother you," he said, his voice low and even. "My car broke down up the road. Could I use your phone?" It was a reasonable request, but something about it didn't sit right. I hadn't heard or seen any cars on the street all evening, and the way he stood so still, so unyielding, set me on edge. "I am sorry," I replied cautiously. "I can't help you. Maybe try the house down the street." For a moment, he didn't move. Then, almost imperceptibly, he smiled. "All right," he said finally. "You have a good night." He turned and walked down the driveway, disappearing into the darkness. I watched him through the window, my stomach twisting with unease. He didn't go far. Instead, he stopped at the edge of the yard, standing just beyond the reach of the street lamp's glow. He stayed there for a long time before finally walking away. I locked the door, double-checking the deadbolt, and tried to shake off the encounter. It was nothing, I told myself. Just a stranger looking for help. But my heart wouldn't stop racing. Around 12:15 a.m., the sound came again. This time, it wasn't a knock at the front door. It was coming from the back. The realization sent a cold wave of fear through me. I crept toward the kitchen, where the back door was located, and peeked through the window. A second man was standing on the back porch. He was shorter than the first, stockier, and he wore a knit beanie pulled low over his forehead. "Hello?" he called out, his voice gruff. "Anyone home?" My heart was pounding so hard I could barely think. He knocked again, louder this time, his fist thudding against the wood. My hands trembled as I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. The dispatcher's voice was calm, steady, as I explained what was happening. "Stay on the line," she instructed. "Officers are on their way." Meanwhile, the man stepped off the porch and disappeared into the yard, melting into the shadows. I stayed crouched in the kitchen, gripping the phone like a lifeline. Minutes felt like hours as I waited for the police to arrive. When the sound of crunching gravel finally broke the silence, I nearly cried with relief. Two officers stepped out of their patrol car, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. I opened the door cautiously, explaining what had happened. They searched the property, their beam sweeping across the yard and into the woods beyond. It wasn't long before one of them called out. "We've got footprints over here," he said. The tracks led from the backyard to the tree line where they disappeared. The officers followed them briefly but found no sign of the men. "Do you know why they might target your house?" one of the officers asked as they returned to the porch. I shook my head. "Number, I have no idea. They advised me to install motion-activated lights and a security system. And call us immediately if anything else happens," the older officer added, his tone serious. For the rest of the night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves outside sent my nerves into overdrive. I sat in the living room with all the lights on, clutching a baseball bat I'd found in the closet. The next morning, I ventured into the yard to inspect the area in daylight. Near the edge of the woods, partially buried under a pile of leaves, I found something that made my stomach churn. A torn piece of fabric. It looked like it had been ripped from a jacket, and it was stained with something dark. Blood? I called the police again, and they collected the fabric as evidence. The officers speculated that the men might have been casing houses in the area, looking for easy targets. But without more information, it was impossible to know for sure. Weeks passed, and life slowly returned to normal, though I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I installed cameras, reinforced the locks, and adopted a large dog for added security. But the memory of that night lingered like a shadow, always just at the edge of my thoughts. To this day, I still don't know who those men were or what they wanted. They never came back, but their presence left a scar that time hasn't healed. And sometimes, late at night, I catch myself listening for the sound of a knock at the door, a sound I hope I never hear again.